Good afternoon. My name is John Mitchell. I'm a commissioner with the Missouri Public Service Commission. I was appointed in April of 24. And so I'm still sort of the new kid on the block and getting used to the position. One of the things that I've learned in my short time at the commission is that Missouri is a great place for economic development. And one of the great enablers of economic development is energy. And that's why I think this discussion is so important. And Missouri, along with almost every other state in the country, is facing a reduction or a tightening in what we call our reserve margin. And that is essentially power that's not allocated, but is really saved and reserved for a particularly large winter storm or an unplanned outage or a summer heat wave, which we're about to go into here. And we're facing those tightening margins, and for decades, the industry has had really flat growth or no growth at all in some years. In those years, it was pretty easy to predict, very predictable what demands would be, what loads would be, and how to manage our systems. But in recent years, that is changing at an incredibly fast pace. I would say right now that the industry is in the eye of the perfect storm. And some of the drivers for that perfect storm are retirement of aging generating units. And those retirements are planned retirements. They're part of everyday blocking and tackling and everyday business planning. But we're also seeing at an increased pace retirements of generating assets that are driven more by regulatory changes, and be that air emissions or decarbonizations, more and more retirements of those types of assets. And when we couple that with increasing electrification of our households and electric vehicles, and industry and manufacturing reshoring. And I think that is somewhat a remnant of the COVID epidemic and really the breakdown in global supply chains. And industry and manufacturing, I think, have made business decisions to bring their supply chains back on shore because it's a better way to manage them. And then, as we've just heard from our friends at MISO, the resurgence or surge of large load customers in our systems, and these are very, very large loads. Think of some of the data centers and mega scale data centers of being able to consume almost every bit of power that a medium-sized power plant can generate. And all of those things combined put additional pressure on those reserve margins. And all of those factors lead to really an exploding demand for energy. And Missouri's not unique in that. I think all of the states are essentially in the same boat. But I do think that Missouri is uniquely positioned to meet those needs. And there's a couple of big reasons that I think that. First of all is that we are unique in that we're served by two large and very capable regional transmission operators. They're MISO on the east side of the state and Southwest Power Pool on the west side of the state. And having those two resources converge in Missouri I think gives us a great deal of flexibility, a great deal of resiliency, and really some great opportunities to collaborate with both RTOs to reinforce our system and to make it more resilient and reliable. The second reason I think that we're well positioned is leadership. Both in the governor's office and the legislature, the leadership in the state is committed to moving at what I think the governor would call business speed to meet these needs and seize the opportunities for economic development in the state. And I think the proof of that is in the recent passage and enactment of Senate Bill 4, which in the utility space gives the utilities in the state and the commission a great deal of flexibility to move faster and still preserve protections for our ratepayers. And I think that's a great thing. I don't think every state has those opportunities. Safe and reliable nuclear power is a significant and very important part of Missouri's energy portfolio. And I believe going into the future that will continue, and I think the position of nuclear power in the state will grow over time. But enough for me. I think we've got a couple of great panelists here this afternoon. Tom Hucker. Tom is a senior consultant with the Department of Energy's Loan Program Office. And Lizzie Yates. Lizzie is the Director of External Affairs and Communications for Southern Power. So maybe, Tom, why don't we start with you and then go to Lizzie and tell us a little bit about your background and your roles in your organizations.
Sure. These are on. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much to the National Governors Association and their whole team for putting this together. I haven't seen a conference like this on this subject in any state. It's a real tribute to you, and to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, Emily, and your team as well. This is a really fabulous conference. I think I've spoken at like 4 dozen conferences this year, and this is also the most beautiful venue that I've been to. So you all really went above and beyond on this one. Also, warning, I can't see any of you. This is amazing being up here.
Yeah, we're flying blind.
But I personally, I'm really excited to be back here because while I live outside Washington, D.C. now in Maryland, I grew up in St. Louis County. My family's still there and in Cape Girardeau, and I really want to personally do everything I can to work with Missouri to make you, help you achieve all your energy goals. I was asked to tell you 3 things. One is, what's the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office? Why would you want an LPO loan, and how do you get one? And also, what role can we play in helping Missouri reach its energy goals? And we'll see if the slides work here. I got to give you a warning. Oh, they do. Federal law requires me to show you dense slides on complicated topics with small print. And I got to go quickly because we don't have that much time, but rest assured, we can share these with you, and you can, my email and phone are on them, so you can call me and email me with any questions you have and any project ideas that you want to kick around with us after this. So the Loan Programs Office, we were started 20 years ago by the Bush administration and Congress, and were authorized in statute in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. The purpose was to create a bank inside the Department of Energy. I know that sounds weird, but the idea was there are so many American entrepreneurs that had a great idea, they had a proven technology, they were no longer risky startups, they had thousands of hours of demonstrated success for their technology, and still they couldn't get a decent commercial bank loan. At the time, one of those companies was Tesla, which they couldn't get a loan 20 years ago. They borrowed $450 million or so from us, and they made billions, paid us back early, and went on to great success, as you all know. That's how the model is supposed to work. And our authority has only been expanded by Congress since then, so now we can finance not just innovative technologies, but ordinary commercialized projects as well. We're at this point the largest public bank, we think, in the world, besides maybe the Bank of China, and I don't think you're going to get a loan from them. We provide attractive debt financing. We have tens of billions of dollars in available loan and loan guarantee authority, and these 7 loan programs and project categories, which you can review. Now, what are those categories? Look at the top of the page, advanced nuclear. We partnered with Southern Company and Lizzie to finance the Vodal project that Lizzie's going to be talking about in a few minutes, the first deployment of AP1000s in the nation. We also recently partnered with Holtec on the shores of Lake Michigan to reopen the Palisades nuclear plant, which had been closed previously. Under advanced nuclear, you see advanced vehicles. We recently lent $9 billion to a joint venture between Ford Motor Company and a Korean battery manufacturer to build 3 new factories in Kentucky and Tennessee to build EV batteries and employ 8,000 Americans. That's the sort of thing we do all the time. Advanced transmission is also on there at the bottom right. This is a priority for this administration, so I'm just going to call out a few of these. We recently lent $15 billion. You all are familiar with the wildfires in California and the black and brownouts there. We lent $15 billion recently to Pacific Gas and Electric for transmission reconductoring to make their grid much more resilient and reliable and efficient, and to prevent blackouts and wildfires in California. We have also done lots of renewables and storage in places like Puerto Rico, which has a very aging grid that's been devastated by hurricanes. So you can use our lending under our congressional authority for projects like that, as well as I'm personally dealing with a lot of, and my colleagues, hundreds of project applications for things like hydrogen, battery storage, geothermal, other renewables, and critical minerals as well, which is another priority of this administration. Now, the value proposition, why would you want a loan from us and not from a bank? If you can get one, that's great. We hope we're filling a gap in the market. But what we offer borrowers in particular is, one, patient capital. Since we're not a bank, we don't have to show a profit. So we can offer loans up to 30 years and at very low interest rates. Typically, the Treasury rate plus 3/8, plus a risk-based charge, but quite a bit lower than you're likely to get just in the commercial market. Second, we offer flexible financing. So all our loans are customized to the needs of the borrower and their cash flow and their technologies. We have thousands of scientists and engineers in the building that are very good at de-risking projects and helping your project be completed on time and on budget, which of course doesn't happen with an awful lot too many infrastructure projects around the country. And the last thing there is we offer a committed partnership with all those engineers and scientists and national labs at the DOE, so that your loan not only gets started, but we monitor all the risks over the life of the loan to make sure you and your company succeed, or your state. We have 4 major financing programs here. I'm only going to talk about Title 17, but I wanted you to know we have one for advanced transportation, one for tribal energy, if you know of any projects on tribal lands, and one for transportation, for CO2 transportation as well. Under Title 17, there's just these 6 requirements. Projects have to be in the United States, energy related, achieving some greenhouse gas or air pollution reduction. We need to show a reasonable prospect of repayment for the taxpayers. Most banks would require a guarantee of repayment, but we are allowed to wear more risk than a bank can, and still de-risk projects because of our technical expertise. And then finally, they have to use technically viable, commercially ready technology and not benefit from other financial federal support. Nuclear checks all those 6 boxes, of course, and many other projects you might have in mind would as well. It's very broad authority. Here's a lot of detail about we can lend up to 80% of a project cost, low interest rates are on there, and out to 30 years. These are the stages of getting our loan. If you've ever applied for a federal grant, it's about the opposite of that. You don't have to keep to yourself, submit your last and best offer, and then not talk to us while we review it. We work with applicants through regular calls every week, every 2 weeks, to help them write their applications. They send us drafts, we send them back with red lines and comments, and we're pulling in the same direction to create an excellent application that then whoever your sponsor is, in your lead in the LPO, can bring before our program committees and get your loan proceeding down that path through due diligence and onto financial close. Nuclear qualifies as one of the innovative energy projects that we're allowed to fund. Many of them will also qualify for energy infrastructure reinvestment if they're on the sites of previous energy land, old coal mines, old coal-fired utility plants, other things like that. EIR projects allow us to finance anything that retools, repowers, repurposes, or replaces older energy infrastructure. And there's a lot of examples here, including transmission line reconductoring and a lot of advanced manufacturing that we finance as well. So that's it. Please reach out with any questions about project ideas that you have. We're open for business and eager to partner with you to drive a new generation of nuclear in Missouri and elsewhere. The last thing I just want to mention is what role I think we can play to help Missouri meet this moment. We believe we want to see an energy transition that is private sector led but government enabled. In the US, of course, private sector owns the generation and the transmission and the distribution assets. The government not only plays a regulatory role, which are other agencies, not us, but we can provide the technical expertise and the financing to help us all succeed as a nation. I want to mention that President Trump has issued a lot of executive orders on energy. This is a real focus of this administration. And some of them you should read emphasize energy abundance and energy dominance, and nuclear is clearly a part of that, of achieving those missions. Another one is on nuclear itself. And he has charged us with setting a goal of 5 gigawatts of power uprates to existing nuclear and having 10 new large reactors under construction by 2030, which is very bold, very ambitious. We can't do it by ourselves. We have to work closely, partnership with the private sector to make that happen. But I want to tell you, we want to play a leadership role, convening players, sharing the expertise at Vogtle and elsewhere, ironing out details, and aligning everybody's incentives so that we can move forward as an industry and a nation. We don't want to just be passive bankers. We want to really be thought partners and leaders in this space, along with the private sector, to help you all achieve your goals. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. That was a great introduction. Lizzie, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your background and your role at Southern Nuclear.
Yeah, sure. First of all, that's probably the best and easiest explanation of the LPO I've seen in a while. So thank you for that. And yes, if you have been here all morning or all day, you've heard Vogtle or the 2 new units that were brought online mentioned a number of times throughout the day. Those are the 2 units that my company, Southern Company, very proudly brought online in 2023 and 2024. They were the first newly constructed units in our country in over 30 years. Yeah, round of applause, let's do it. And as we have this discussion, just for context, while our nuclear power plants specifically serve the states of Alabama and Georgia, we too are feeling a lot of the things that you're feeling in Missouri. So for instance, we are a 44 gigawatt system and anticipate increasing that to 55 gigawatts over the next 10 years. In Georgia alone, we are projected 8,500 megawatts of load growth by the end of 2030. So, this is a problem, or a problem is the wrong word, an exciting opportunity that we're all facing together. And as we look at that large gigawatt scale demand, we do believe that large gigawatt scale nuclear power is an important part of the solution. But as we will get into today, in order to realize the cost savings that we saw from units 4 and unit 3, and I'm going to tell the whole story. I'm not going to leave any assumptions. I'm going to walk you through the risks, what existed, what no longer exists, what's going to be different, and why. But in order to do it, we have to do it together. And so I'm appreciative of the opportunity to be here today. Thank you to the university and to everyone else who's helped put this on.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. It occurs to all of us that cost is really one of the biggest hurdles to get across. I had a conversation yesterday with the CEO of one of our large utilities here in Missouri, and just chatting a little bit about Vogtle and the cost of Vogtle would represent a little over half of the market cap of this utility. And so that's the
And there are
struggle in
reasons.
getting your head around the cost. So, what are some of the things that you learned at Vogtle and some of the opportunities to apply that knowledge to reducing cost?
Great question. And yes, we had a very storied adventure, a very storied timeline to building Vogtle 3 and 4. It was about 15 years. But I think in order to truly unpack and really understand the reasons that it was over budget and past schedule, I really need to just very quickly take you through a timeline, and then we'll unpack it. So if I may, I'd like to start at 2009, when we signed a fixed price contract, an EPC contract, engineering, procurement, and construction contract with Westinghouse. And that sounds great, but the problem is that the design was not sufficiently complete. Therefore, the estimations for the project were inaccurate, right? So imagine trying to build something, and as you're building it, you're changing it. So imagine 1,000 change orders forcing you to build out of sequence, which ultimately led to that primary contractor going bankrupt. But before then, we had Fukushima happen. A tsunami in Japan caused an accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which ended up leading to delays in the review of our license application. When the contractor declared bankruptcy, we were left with a situation to re-estimate, okay, what is the true cost of this project going to be? What's it really going to take? And we decided through our Public Service Commission review and all the other reviews that it was the right decision to do, and we kept going forward. And then COVID hit. My boss likes to say that at some point, if locusts and slugs started coming out of the ground, he was like, I quit, I'm done. Just all these bad things keep happening. But COVID hit. And while the rest of us were sitting at home learning how to use Microsoft Teams, the project never skipped a day of work. And the only way that we were able to do that is working with the labor teams and our partners to figure out, okay, how do we make this a safe environment for us to continue to work and to continue to construct and to build it at the level of quality and safety that is mandated and expected within the nuclear industry. And so that's what we did. But in the backdrop of all of that, I think it's really important to acknowledge, and you heard some of this morning already, we embarked on a mission to build this in a landscape where throughout the 80s and 90s, the nuclear construction landscape had largely deteriorated. While we have amazing amounts of proficiency and knowledge, and I do hope to have the opportunity to kind of tell you a little bit about that side of the business and who's gonna be running and building these things, while that part is strong, the supply chains and the workforce needed to construct these had to be built from scratch again. And so if you think about that story, so now I've finished the story, right? The units are online, they're running beautifully, as well as or better than the rest of the units around the country. I want you to think about risk in 3 buckets, okay? The first is technology risk. Like I said, we started building before we had a design that was sufficiently complete. That risk for an AP1000 anyhow is now retired. And that means that we know exactly how many parts it's gonna take, exactly how many men and women it will take to do it. We know what that takes, all right? The second is regulatory. The AP1000 is licensed, tested, certified, designed, operating, no longer regulatory risk. If anything, we are working with NRC to improve and advance the AP1000. So that leaves 1 bucket. And that bucket is that immature nuclear construction landscape that I was referencing. And the funny thing is you've heard a lot today that the more we build, the more the cost will come down. And we know that because we built Unit 4 20% more cheaply than Unit 3, and we tested and commissioned it in nearly half the time. And we documented all of those lessons learned, and those lessons learned are ones that we are proactively and actively sharing with anyone who is serious in building a new AP1000. But it's like the chicken and the egg, right? We know that we've got to build them to bring the cost down, but it's really expensive, so we need the cost to come down before we can start to build. So here we are in this cost situation. And the reason that we still need some some creative ways to continue to bring the cost down is because the utilities who are responsible for these 80, 60, 100-year units, these aren't wind turbines. And my background, I should have said, was in wind and solar and biomass and natural gas, so I'm an all of the above girl. But these are long-lived assets. And so when you think about the cost that's needed and the way to move forward, we have to protect our customers, our existing customers, from any potential cost overruns that could come from a Fukushima or from a COVID or something that you and I in this room are not capable of expecting, right? We're not asking for protection for bad project management, but really for protection for the existing utility customers, because we do not believe that they should be responsible for bearing that cost. But also, we need help in lowering the cost of the overall asset, because we also have to protect shareholders who own, especially these investor-owned utilities, right? And so the ways that we do that are through the Loan Program Office. Through the LPO, we saved our customers hundreds of millions of dollars. It's through things like tax credits. We were thrilled to see in the Big Beautiful Bill the preservation of investment tax credits, production tax credits, and even the transferability of those tax credits to be able to apply those during construction, therefore putting downward pressure and alleviating kind of that credit risk that we were talking about for shareholders. In Georgia, when we built, we called it CWIP. I learned last night that in Missouri we call it QUIP. But it was a way for us to recover costs to, again, try to protect the company as a whole. But it's not just government. We do understand that, and the off-takers, these potential hyperscalers, they understand their own role in coming to the table to try to get these initial costs down in a way that protects ratepayers, in a way that enables us to get out and build these. And so those are the cost challenges. It's going to take a lot of different solutions. There's no one silver bullet. It's going to take all of this coming together with a strong federal partner, creative solutions to get there. And it'll impact, of course, as I said, an AP 1000, but also an SMR or any future design. We have to navigate those challenges to build up that supply chain, to make our workforce proficient. I use a flat screen TV analogy. You used to go to Radio Shack and buy a big old TV for thousands of dollars, and now you can go to Costco and get the same size for like $300. That's because over time we've developed proficiency, we've gotten really good at doing it. A nuclear unit's never gonna cost $300, but we can all aspire to that, right? And that's what we have to work toward.
Absolutely. And earlier we talked about the LPOs. I'm sorry. Earlier we talked about the LPO's involvement and how did the LPO dovetail into this process?
Well, I wasn't there, so I'm not sure I can tell you, but I know, like any applicant, Southern Company comes to us with an application. We work in partnership with our applicants. As I mentioned, we work collaboratively, so through a series of regular meetings, they go through the stage gates. A nuclear plant is more complicated than a solar field, but the rules are the same rules, and we're an eligibility-based bank, and so we look at, we look at kind of the same things for every applicant. Do you have site control? Do you have reliable feedstock? Do you have offtake? How are you going to make money on this so that you can pay the taxpayers back? And what happens? What are all the things that could go wrong, and what are we going to do to mitigate those risks? And it takes years, but then we get to the finish line.
Yeah, it's a lot of transparency, a lot of transparent conversations. You're going to get to know each other really well because it's part of de-risking, right? Mm-hmm. The only other comment that I'll add about LPO that I think is important to point out is, we talk about durable policy, and when we say durable policy, we mean policy that's going to, take about a decade to build projects. How do you have policy that is going to be sound from, year to year to year? And I think it's great to look to the LPO as an example of something that was established under President Bush, initially funded, we got our initial loans under President Obama. Mm-hmm. Then we got additional funding through President Trump's first term, mm-hmm. and then his first draft of the bill actually called for program 1703 to be fully funded. And you'll see us, and I believe others in this room, leaning in to ensure that it is fully funded as one of those important drivers to helping bring the cost down so that we can all get out there and build together.
Great, great. And you mentioned SMR technology, and again, we use a lot of acronyms. SMR is a small modular reactor, and that conjures up visions of a reactor built in a shipping container that can be deployed and set up in short order. But that's not at all what these things are. They're a small modular reactor is 300 gigawatt or so unit, and
With a big landscape too. To your point, it's not just this tiny little thing.
Right, right. And does the LPO have a preference for technology? I guess given that the AP1000s now have been built twice, and in the United States there aren't any SMRs that have been built.
We don't have a preference. I wouldn't use that word because we're an eligibility-based bank, and the rules are the same regardless of the technology. We do need to see a licensed, completed design from the NRC. The NRC can approve a design tomorrow that we don't know about, and they're doing a lot to expedite their process. But to your point, the AP1000s are licensed, are fully designed now, unlike when Southern started the project. They've been performing very well in the US. They've been performing very well in other countries as well. And so we like to say at the LPO to all our applicants all the time, your project, your choice. But if you're starting with an SMR, regardless of what you're choosing, you'd need to get a licensed design and the approval from the NRC as well.
Gotcha. Good.
Well, and I want to be clear that I say that I believe and we believe that the next right step to meet the moment is the AP1000 or a large light water reactor. The French have a saying, or there's a French economist, and he says that the French have 30 different types of cheeses and one type of reactor. And in America, we have one type of cheese, American cheese, and 30-something different types of reactors. And he's not far off. I think that as we look at meeting this moment, and again, what we've just talked about, if you think back to that story about Vogtle and how you get to that, flat screen TV that costs $300, it is building. And so I think the next right step is an AP1000, but I do think that SMRs are important. There's a lot of work being done. One of the slides earlier that was shown by Craig Piercy showed the MCFR, the molten chloride fast reactor. It's what's called a Gen 4 reactor. Southern Company's been leading the way on that since 2014. So again, there's a lot of investment, and we do think that they're important. But when we talk about the next right moment, we have to think about what's the cheapest option, what's the best option, especially within our territory, a regulated, vertically integrated market. We have to serve all customers. And what's the best option to do that? Because that's what we're going to be held accountable to. And so that's the solution that if we can get the cost right, we think is probably the next right step for nuclear.
And I suppose at large scale and large scale need, SMRs have a niche, but may not be the right solution in every case, or even a very limited number of cases. Would you agree with that?
I think that they will serve a purpose. Until we see one built and operated and licensed in the United States, I don't feel comfortable commenting on that. But what I will say is that, if you look up in Canada and the work that they're doing, I think they're probably the farthest along with their BWRX 300. We want to see that successful. We were the ones that carried the banner and got beat up all over the place for, being over budget and delayed with the AP1000, but somebody had to do it. Somebody has to go first. And I think that once we see one of these designs get to the finish line, I think that we'll be able to understand better, how do we maximize the benefits that come with an SMR, such as, it's called the EPZ, the Emergency Planning Zone. It's smaller for an SMR, so you could maybe put that more closely adjacent to a city, perhaps. But I don't think that we necessarily know the answer quite yet on, and there's probably others in this room who could probably answer the question better than I have so far.
Sure, fair enough. And, I think when I first heard your story of Vogtle, it struck me as pretty incredible that we hadn't built a commercial scale nuclear reactor in 30 years. And, your experience and Tom's experience to the industry is invaluable. And I wondered if you could reflect on just some of the key takeaways from your experience with the Vogtle project.
Sure. Well, I've said the first, and you heard it this morning. I joked, I high-fived both Doug True and Craig Piercy and was like, hey, thanks for stealing my thunder, but also that's awesome that you said what I wanted, what I believe is the right thing, which is design once, build many. We got to keep doing this over and over again. And that comes back to key takeaway number one, which is make sure that the technology is sufficiently complete before you go to build in order to really minimize the risk to anybody and everyone around you. So that's number one. But I think the second one, as we reflect at the macro level, really comes down to relationships and trust. And in a couple of different capacities. From the trust with the public and trust with NRC and trust with the Public Service Commission. We, every 6 months, we called it the V as in Victor CM, Vogtle Construction Monitoring Report. Every 6 months, we put all of our dirty laundry out for everybody to see. You can read every place where we either were late or early or the good things, the bad things, but it's out there. We were completely transparent and honest every step of the way. And I think that transparency and that honesty is what has earned us the credibility to continue having the conversation today. I also think that it's important to have trust and transparency when you think of, once again, these are projects that you're going to build over many years, right? You could have different CEOs come through. You could have different branches of the government be led by different parties. There's all kinds of variables, but the strength of your relationships and transparency is how you remain durable and resilient through that time. I also think that as an industry, and you heard this a lot this morning too, we really need to reintroduce ourselves to the communities. And I don't just mean, convincing people. I too am a victim of Captain Planet and the slime and the three-eyed fish from Homer Simpson. I don't just mean correcting the perception of radiation from green goos to your bananas and your granite countertops because you get 620 millirim of dose every year anyhow. An average nuclear power plant worker gets 150 from being at the power plant every single day. And for context, the NRC's limit is 5,000. So there's a big perception there. But I think just reintroducing who are the people in this industry who kept their heads down and got really good at what they do and how do they work? Because I'm here to tell you that if I stump my toe, then I'm going to call Constellation and I'm going to say, hey, I stumped my toe. Come over here. I need you to see where I stumped it. You got it? Okay, don't stump your toe. In the same way, if we're in the chili cook-off, these are all hyperbolic examples, by the way. But if I'm in the chili cook-off and I have, I get first place, I'm gonna give them the first place recipe. I'm gonna make them recite back to me the secret ingredient, make sure they got it, and then say, hey, if you make it better, you give it back to me. That is the integrity of this industry, not just domestically, but abroad. We work, one of my counterparts is in the audience, and I know her so well. I know her better than some of the people within all of Southern Company because we lean in to help each other. Those are the people who have gotten so good at operating these plants, who, for reasons like that, Forbes refers to the nuclear industry as the safest industry in the United States, period. Like over accountants and insurance and all of that. But it's because of our behaviors, and those are the people who are going to be building. Those are the people who are going to be operating. And I think that there is just this, who are these people? Who is this industry? And no, we don't produce three-eyed fish, that we've got to get through to listen to people and then to understand their concerns and then to re-educate.
If I could just build on that a little, I just want to personally thank Lizzie and Southern Company for being here, and I think we all ought to be grateful for doing what my colleague who leads our nuclear team describes as a Southern Company ran through a wall.
It kind of felt like that at times.
Right, and began, wouldn't do things, admittedly, wouldn't do things exactly the same way. Hindsight in all our major decisions in life is often 20/20. But if you begin with it, now we're all in a position to benefit from it, as Lizzie said, and all the other operators and developers have a completed design, have a trained workforce, have a supply chain that's in place. And while first movers always bear the risk and have to endure the cost overruns and delays of being out there, you can now if we could put together a consortium of utilities or of hyperscalers to put together an order book of 4 or 5 5 to 10 AP1000s in multiple different states and service territories, especially if you could align the risk through the EPC contracts and the power purchase agreements, then you really come down the cost curve and can achieve what the president envisions in the executive order.
Absolutely. And, we've mentioned Vogtle being the first one to get through the gate in 30 years, which I think is an incredible story. And when I heard your story and heard Tom's story, I reflected for a bit, and really what we're in essence doing is really completely reestablishing or rebuilding an industry. And I think one of the things that dovetails nicely with that is the executive orders, bold executive orders on the number of new assets. 10 new plants in 5 years seems like a pretty far reach if we kind of look back at history and say we've done one project with 2 reactors in 30 years. So I think that really, pardon my use of the words, provides critical mass for moving forward. That backlog or that book of projects really provides the springboard to rebuild the technology providers, engineering, supply chains, and really the highly specialized construction workforce that it takes to build these things.
Well, and that's the point that I would hit on. I don't think, I want to be careful to say we're not rebuilding the industry as a whole, but we are rebuilding the construction landscape of it. Because as an example, we go to build, let's say, a Trump Tower. That's hard enough, but then add a layer of, the nuclear standards with which we expect for ourselves, but with which we were also held accountable to. Someone earlier today mentioned INPO. It's the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. It's the U.S.-based office of WANO, the World Association of Nuclear Operators. And we are evaluated, I don't know that any other industry does this, but we are evaluated on like 300 different indicators a month. I mean, not just like your chemistry water levels, but like I have to prove that there is a culture on here in this workforce that is looking at themselves every day and trying to figure out where do I need to self-correct and how do I do it. The closest thing to an industry like that I think exists is maybe airlines, and thinking about it that way. If you compare it to the fact that, and we talked about, I went to dinner last night with a couple of people and we talked about it, and it's like, the pilot is responsible for the safety of all the people on this plane. He takes his job seriously. There is a procedure. He checks the door 3 times. It's not good enough to check it once. It's not good enough to check it twice. We're going to check it 3 times. That's how the nuclear industry works, because we view what we do as so important to protecting the core and keeping the lights on for the community, that's the standard and that is the level of expertise. That is there. But you're right, the supply chain and bringing more people into that fold, and continuing to innovate at the existing fleet. And we're doing things like, it's the worst name ever, accident tolerant fuel. I hate the name, it sounds terrible, but basically it's just higher enriched fuel that's gonna burn longer and keep our reactors running faster. Even little innovations like that, every little thing frees up an engineer to look and do something and spend their time doing something different, so.
Absolutely. Tom and Lizzie, I think your story is an incredible one. And I think the wealth of knowledge that's been built here, it should be very valuable to the industry. And I'd encourage anyone here who's contemplating this to reach out to both Tom and Lizzie. My sense is that you're willing to share your experience and knowledge with the industry in order to move this forward. I'd like to thank you for being here. Again, it's an incredibly interesting story, and really a great feat of engineering and construction and management. And I'd like you to give me a little help in giving Tom and Lizzie a round of applause for being here today.